microphone, it's more or less working. All right. Yeah, so we're down to chapter 3 here. So when you have a security incident and you're calling your incident response team, you've got some questions. This is pretty predictable. It's sort of what anyone would ask. People want to know, how did the attackers get in? What did they steal? Are they gone yet? They want to know, what do we have to do now? Who do we have to notify? And how do we fix it so this can't happen again? That's what everybody wants. And in practice, only the most mature companies that actually have efficient incident response teams, or that are willing to pay for good consultants, ever get anywhere near this. Like I say, all the small companies I deal with just re-image a server, don't fix the problem at all, and call it a day. Because that's all they know how to do, because they don't have any security team. They just have a server administration team, and that's all they know how to do. So they try to pretend that's good enough. And that's really not good enough, but it takes time. They have to get hurt many times before they admit that they're going to have to invest in real incident response. So to make this work right, there are 3 kinds of preparation: the organization, the team, and the infrastructure. And so to prepare the organization, you can have, first you have to do risk analysis. And this has been known for a long time. In order to secure anything, you have to decide exactly what you need to do. You cannot make anything perfectly secure, and you cannot protect everything. So first you have to make a scientific assessment of the risks and decide which risks are worth mitigating and which risks are not worth mitigating. Then you have to have policies, and there are issues with outsourcing and global infrastructure and users. So you have to find your assets. There are assets such as your corporate reputation. This is highly controversial in the business. Very many companies got hacked, like Target and TJ Maxx, and yet it didn't have any effect on their stock price after a couple of weeks, and didn't have any effect on the number of customers going using credit cards in the store. So many people say this reputation loss is actually a myth. Other people say they lost a lot of money for this dip in their stock price, and you don't know how many customers might have gone somewhere else. And they argue greatly about how real this loss of corporate reputation is. Certainly, there are companies like LinkedIn that were just made it very clear that they had no interest in security at all, and didn't even see that they should have any, and nobody really seemed to care. So anyway, then you've got business information, which is your proprietary documents and things you're developing. You don't want to lose, like, the source code for the next version of whatever you make. And PII is the identification of your employees or customers, and the law requires you to disclose that, and they can sue you with a class action lawsuit. So most people try to head that off by giving them some kind of value, like a coupon and credit monitoring, so that they've already received something, and that would hopefully decrease their interest in forming a class action and suing you, because they probably already got whatever value they were going to get out of that. And then your PCI, your credit card numbers. You are not supposed to be storing them, but they are often stored, and they're often stealable, even if they were just in use. Target didn't store them, but they got infected with malware through the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning company, and they put in malware that stole it out of RAM while the credit cards were being swiped. And it stayed there for about a year, stealing all the credit cards as you swipe them. And they were compliant with PCI DSS standards, but they still got hacked. And of course, every company that did get hacked and lost credit cards was compliant with PCI DSS, because if they weren't, they wouldn't have had any credit card numbers to steal. All right, so exposures are weak spots in your network that can do you harm. Things that aren't patched, things that go to the internet, employees that are a hazard, either through malice or through incompetence. That is the number one risk, of course. People get hacked from the outside quite rarely. Something like 80% of all breaches are from your own employees doing foolish things with the data. Obviously, that's likely to happen. They already have accounts and passwords. They're already using the data, and some of them put it on the wrong server or make other foolish mistakes. All right. And so there are threat actors. In order to do threat modeling, you have to decide what is the risk that you're concerned about, and you have to consider who they are. Some attackers come from far away on the internet, and so things like firewalls and intrusion detection systems will stop them. Then you worry about what if the attackers actually are physically inside the building, plugging into the jack walls, and what if they're physically getting into the server room or something, and those are different threats. And you have to decide which threat you want to stop, and you need different controls for each case. So you should have policies so people know what they can do. There should be rules of what people are allowed to do on the website and allowed to do with the computers. Are you allowed to play games on them? Are you allowed to install software on them, take them home, and let your kid play with them, and then bring them back and connect them to the network using your phone and your iPad to do company things? You should have rules for these things. And then you have other things, security policy affecting many issues in the company, like how you lock the doors and how you vet the employees, and remote access policy. is the big one in the two case histories we talked about in the first class. People manage to get valid remote access credentials and then come in just the way the employees come in, and that is a huge problem. Almost nobody can deny remote access because your employees really do have to travel to conferences and meetings and connect in, and so then you're going to worry about how do you really know their employees coming in. A wise, simple security measure is to always make them use two-factor authentication. So even if somebody steals their password or their computer or their wallet, they still can't get in because no one of those objects is enough. A lot of people outsource their IT, and this is an issue of company culture. I mean, some people have their own developers, their own network administrators, their own server administrators, and they cultivate these people and improve them, and they get training and better, and they value them. And a lot of other companies say, look, we're in the business of making something like shoes. We don't really care about IT. It's not our core competency. We just want to outsource it to somebody, put everything in the cloud, and then we don't have to pretend to know anything about IT because what we know about is shoes. And which is another reasonable attitude to take. But it means this is what happens to when I try to help people whose website has been hacked and they are on managed hosting services. You can't get the logs at all. The logs are in the hosting provider, and you don't have any right to see them, and you don't have any access that will let you navigate to the directories where the logs are. So you can't. That's pretty harsh. When you can't even get to the logs, you really can't do much in the way of root cause analysis. And so it goes, and this is quite common, that people have service level agreements which don't include any of this. And they also don't include any option for asking for extra service, like what's the extra fee to get the logs? And they just say, there's nobody there, we don't care, we don't do that work. Yeah?
Does Cloudflare allow you to look at the logs?
Yes, Cloudflare gives you a web panel, and you can log in and you can see a log of all the transactions, and you can even get a list of all the IP addresses, and I've had people send me their lists of IP addresses so I can help them.
Format or Excel format?
Yes, you can just download it, and there was a guy that we found a botnet of 2,000 WordPress blogs that had been hacked because I had the addresses and I was notifying these people, and yeah, so I mean, Cloudflare is pretty good about that, but a lot of other people aren't. Yeah, like GoDaddy, I think. If you get a GoDaddy hosting account, you don't have access to the logs, and I don't think there's any way for you to get access to them. Yeah?
If you have a contract to outsource something and you get hacked,
Yeah.
who's responsible if you have the service?
That is actually very clear. Every cloud provider I know of makes it extremely clear in their terms of service that security is your responsibility. And yet something like 80% of corporate IT people that put things in the cloud in surveys say, well, I think cloud providers taking care of that. This is why they get hacked, because in fact nobody's taking care of it. They each imagine the other person's doing it. But the cloud service providers, of course, this is the first issue. You have 10,000 websites on your server, a bunch of them are going to get hacked, and so the first thing you do is put clauses in the contract saying, we take no responsibility if you get hacked, you got to back up your data, you got to secure your server, don't blame us. And, you know, that's the way, of course, that's the way it pretty much has to be, because if you're going to let them put up PHP scripts and stuff, they're very likely to put up an insecure thing or put up WordPress in an old version and plugins. So, I mean, they wouldn't be able to do what they bought the service for if you forced them to be secure. So the only thing you can do is say you're doing that at your own risk. And I know DigitalOcean I use has a whole bunch of helpful pages telling you how to secure your website, how to update your WordPress. And whenever you get hacked, they will send you links. Please read our instructions and be more secure. But they don't enforce that because they would just be kicking off all their customers. But they might eventually kick me off because I got servers that keep getting hacked there because they're deliberately vulnerable. So that's why, you know, I'm sort of interested in students in Saturday class are setting up our own cloud servers here. I may have to host my attack websites locally if they keep getting hacked by malware so much. I'm trying to make them so my students can hack them, but the bad guys can't. And I've been only somewhat successful at that so far. Anyway, so if you have global infrastructure, you have data centers all over the world in different locations, now you've got problems because their privacy regulations are different in each country. So even just sending like packet captures from one location to another may violate things. The biggest issue here I know of is the European safe harbor law. Europe has very strong privacy laws, which we do not have in the United States at all. The legal status of privacy defenses in the United States is very peripheral. They interpret some of the 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights to imply something like privacy as part of freedom of speech or something, but it's not there explicitly at all, and it's very unclear what it means. Whereas in Europe, they have really laws with teeth that say if you collect data from someone for one purpose, like a warranty registration card because you bought a product, you cannot use it for some other purpose, like sell it to another company to send them catalogs about something else, and that's done all the time in the US because it's legal. So and now, ever since Snowden leaked out all these documents about what the NSA is doing, and it became public knowledge that the internal networks at Yahoo and Google and everything were tapped, and the NSA was just reading it all, and that AT&T has just been handing over the entire telephone network and the entire internet network to the government, where they're snooping on everything. That made it clearly illegal for any European to do business here. And no European company can use any American cloud service like Google or Gmail or Yahoo or Amazon E2C, because if they're in the United States, or in fact probably even in another country owned by the United States, which is another big issue, then they're subject to arbitrary spying by the NSA, and that violates the European privacy laws. But that is insane, because in Europe they don't have any comparable services at the same price, so the businesses would all go broke. So they had a temporary exception to their privacy rules in the form of the Safe Harbor Act, which expired about 6 months ago. And for like 6 months it was technically illegal for them to use American services, and they passed some new exception to their Privacy Act. It is a huge issue, as the privacy laws are different in different locations. So it's a problem. Another thing, of course, is if you do investigation, I mentioned before, it is a whole lot nicer to work with small things like log files. If you actually have to make disk images, now you've got a bunch of 500 gigabyte files that you have to do something with. And one of the many things that's hard to do with those files is move them over network links, large distances, to analyze them. So those are issues that come there. How much to educate users is a very contentious issue. One of the big famous security thought leaders about a year and a half ago said, educating end users is completely worthless, don't even bother, just assume that the end user is completely stupid and try to secure stuff so no button they can hit will do any harm. And yet people do continue to educate their users, and with mixed success. I mean, and realistically, the fact is you can get in any company anywhere with phishing. Spear phishing, if you write a careful email with an attachment and just send it to the right people, you have a 20% chance that someone will click on the link. So if you send 10 or 20 of those, somebody will click on the link, and this is how they hacked RSA and every famous company you've heard of. And you could blame the end users for that, but I think this is just sort of nuts. If you have 1,000 employees, there is somebody that's going to click on the link, no matter how much you tell them no. Anyway, but on it goes. So one thing you can do is train your end users in your policies so that they know what to do if there is a security incident. I know when we had the first one, the escrow agency I worked for years ago, we had an MS-DOS-based network. The antivirus went off. This red thing's flashing. And we all looked at each other and said, I've never seen that thing go off. And none of us had any clue, what are we supposed to do when that thing goes off? Who do we call? What do we turn off? We actually had no clue at all. And that's what you want to fix. You want to have some person to contact and have some rules. Typically, you do not want people to do an investigation on their own, because they will just stumble around, destroy the evidence, and confuse the trail. One thing that we're making clear to people is that they can't install server software, like games. Most modern games, the multiplayer games, make you into a server. And in fact, I've had students that became network administrators and tell me they're now getting denial of service attacks in their company, which they never got before. And that's one of the many things bad about games. If you play live multiplayer games, a lot of people cheat in the game by DDoSing other people. So if you play it at work, they're sending attacks into the company network to win the game. And so this is why, it's not just that they hate anyone having fun, but there's good reasons why people won't let you use BitTorrent or play games on the company network. Anyway, all right, I got a few iClicker questions. You should come get one. There's another layer of those things, perhaps on the floor. There should be enough of those things for everybody.
Leave your name and number, sir.
Yeah, and the clicker should be down on the floor, I guess. Yeah.
You need the numbers and can give you the grade.
Yeah, you leave your name behind.
That leads you back down to.
And there's a scrap of paper up there to write your name on if you don't have anything expendable.
Without paying. So it's worth not getting fined for that. It's crazy. It's crazy. You have to go on the outside of the parking lot.
See if this thing is going to work.
It's crazy. I saw Judy Kish.
Ah, that looks good.
Next to the Cafe Tazo. Cafe Tazo.
How you doing?
The other cafe on the way there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the other cafe,
They had it.
Good.
SWAT police, SWAT, special force.
So did you hear the story about the iOS 935?
The iOS what?
Yeah.
The iOS 935 upgrade, they find spy.
Yeah, that was where they hacked the activist with 3 0s. Yeah. That was, and what's funny, that's probably worth mentioning in the news. That was another. So the nation state For $1 million, they developed this attack against human rights workers or something using 3.0 days in iOS. And they released the information to Apple so Apple could patch it, but they did not release exploit code. And all the news said, update your iOS or someone will spy on you. And I'm asking, well, if the exploit's not out there, why do you care? If a nation state's coming after you, you're dead anyway. They have 100 other 0 days that Apple doesn't know about. So anyway, it's an awful lot of things that get people excited are debatable on close examination. But I mean, they are right that now the technique to put spyware on an iPhone, people know more about it than they used to, but they don't really have an exploit in the public world. So anyway.
There's only 2 questions?
What's that?
You see how many questions? There's only 2 I clicked for this.
There's only 2 for this section. Yeah, there'll be more
Short
later.
section,
Yeah, there'll be more later. All right, so an administrator fails to get a promotion and is angry. Now what have we got? All right, I'll quit at 30. All right, and that's an exposure. You now have a weak spot in your network. No, that'd be in the worst case if they actually attack the company, but just being angry is considered an exposure. It's a risk. There are some cases where that did happen. There was a famous case where a guy got fired and then immediately drove to McDonald's, hacked in with VPNs and destroyed all their servers. But if they haven't quit yet or been fired, they just didn't get a promotion, I don't know. The immediate thing you know here is that you have a risk. This person might do something bad. They might be interested in taking money to hack the network. But they could be a threat actor, but I think a fair statement of what you've got here is an exposure. And by the way, it might just be a bad question, but if I haven't mentioned it before, if you want to get a CISSP, and you really do, the questions are much, much worse than this. In the CISSP, all 5 answers are wrong, and you're trying to choose which one is slightly less stupid than the others. You have to get used to that. And I think this is an attempt to simulate what it is to be a manager, when you have people coming and telling you stuff, and it's all pretty much wrong, and yet you're still got to steer the ship. Anyway, but for better or worse, that's the way it really is. Anyway, so which one of these will reduce problems with outsourced IT?
What's SLA again?
Well, I'll quit at 30, and then we can discuss it. I thought there was an answer, but I can be talked. I can be talked out of it.
I think there's, yeah.
All right, and the one I'm looking for is SLAs. A service level agreement specifies exactly what they do, and if you include things in your SLA, like access to logs and special requests, then you can have a lot less trouble dealing with your outsourced stuff. Yeah.
Why is policy?
A policy is a vague container, and the SLA is the specific policy. Yeah, that's right. Policy has some truth, but SLA most specifically answers the question. That's really
That is an agreement between you and the.
right. Yeah, you have a service level agreement, so they promise to keep it up 99% of the time, just send someone within 24 hours to fix it if it's broken, and so on. And if you actually,
internal, like, hey, you're going to follow this, and there's not really much.
yeah,
Not really much consequences that you can sue over the SLA.
Yeah.
In court.
that's right. That's right.
Policy may not.
And there can be like fines for being late and that sort of thing. All right, good. All right, so you got an IR team. You got to get these people at it. So you're going to have to define the mission of your IR team, and it may have clauses like this. It'll depend on your company, but certainly you want to control and contain incidents, do some kind of investigation, and quickly determine whether things are real security incidents, and obey the law, protect the private information of people, and maintain confidentiality of the This is, by the way, another thing. If you're going to be any kind of IT professional, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, especially in this kind of work, because the company, you're going to find stuff on their network, like you're going to find vulnerabilities that they may not patch until later, and you're not allowed to tell people. You're going to be seeing their corporate data, and the very facts of that they got hacked is something they want to control through their legal team and PR team. They don't want you blogging about it, telling the world what happened. Yeah.
This is why a lot of companies hire consultants.
Well, no, they hire consultants because they don't have the talent in-house,
Okay.
but every time they do hire any kind of security consultant, you always have to sign an NDA, promising that you are not going to talk about what you find on this network. Now, of course, if you find something horrible, like kiddie porn or murder in progress or something, then, especially kiddie porn, if you find kiddie porn, this is a fundamental rule worth mentioning, you must immediately cease your investigation because even seeing it is a felony. You have to ignore all of the promises you made anyone and go straight to the FBI immediately. There's the National Center for Exploited Children, and if someone brings in a machine for repair and you find kiddie porn on it, you give it to the FBI, the repair job is over, your client's never going to see it again, you turn them in and you back up. Because if you don't do that immediately, then you are guilty of possessing this stuff, and this stuff is radioactive. But unless something ridiculous like that happens, you keep confidentiality of anything you find out on the company network, just like doctors are not allowed to talk about what you tell them, doctors and lawyers, for the same reason. You're supposed to be able to tell your incident response team and your doctor and your lawyer, you're supposed to tell them the truth, even if it's bad, even if it involves committing illegal acts and admitting them, because they're there to help you. Anyway, so that's an issue here. You may also wish to provide expert testimony if you're actually going to prosecute people in court for committing crimes on your network, and you might want to do that if, for example, they're an employee that you can locate and you want to be able to punish them in court. Then you'd want to preserve evidence and have expert testimony. Very few companies do that. Most of them accept that it is just too much bother to prosecute people. If they're outside the company, we will let the cops do it. If they're inside the company, we'll just fire them. We don't really want to have to go to court and make a big stink out of things, unless it was like a manager embezzling a vast amount of money and there's a chance of maybe getting that money back or something. Anyway, so you've got to have communications. One issue might be that you should be putting these confidentiality notices on some of your communications as requested by your legal team, because if you put that on something, then it is a confidential legal exchange with your attorney, and now it doesn't have to be produced if you get sued. It's not evidence against you in court. So a lot of people make a habit of just putting this on essentially all emails to try to have less of an obligation to produce them later. Internal communications is a big issue, and here we can thank the NSA and Snowden for bringing this to attention. I've had this argument for maybe a decade with companies that they should use encrypted services on your local area network, and everyone doesn't care. They say, oh no, we lock the door, we don't let bad people on the network, so it's perfectly fine to use plain text communication within our network. And I'm like, dude, what planet are you on? People are getting infected, they're bringing in infected machines from the outside. How do you trust everybody on your network? But it's too much bother, and even Yahoo and Google had internal unencrypted communication between their data centers, and the NSA totally put taps in there and stole all of it, and then it got leaked out from Snowden. So the result is now people are all upgrading to encrypted internal traffic, which is a whole lot better. So your email is a big issue. When the bad guys attack your network, they will immediately go to the email server and start reading your email to see if you've detected their intrusion yet. So one big issue is when you do an instant response, you have to not talk about it in email. Have to have some other communication channel that hopefully the bad guys can't find. And encrypting email would help. S-MIME is the most practical encryption scheme where everybody has a certificate. PGP is a third-party option, and key handling is not as automatic and very clumsy to set up. But one or the other of these should be used. Yeah.
Did you solve this by using like something like a drive software? Is like it's group? It's sort of like a portal. It's old now. But can you post this to a portal and make that secure?
Let me wait and see if they'll get done making all that noise out there.
Like the internet portal?
I guess something's on fire. Must be pretty big. Okay, now you want to have a portal?
Yeah, like for internal communications, old style.
Well, the question is, what's the, you have to encrypt the traffic to and from it then.
Okay.
And then you have to somehow handle a key. So, like that's essentially what it's meant. It might involve a proxy for a portal. It certainly will involve encryption on your email servers like your Outlook Web Access server. But anyway, that's the game here. So you got to encrypt things with something. S-MIME is one option. Label documents. Watch who's on your conference calls. If people get into your phone network or they steal the emails that invite people, they can just join the conferences. And there were some famous cases where that happened. So there's just an extra person listening to your conference. This is, we have a group, an email list, CCSF hackers, people are in the Hackers Club, and when we started engaging in cyber competitions, one of the people involved was quite upset saying, you have to restrict membership to this group, or we can't talk about our competition stuff in this group, because people from other teams could just join the group and see what you're doing, and there's some truth in that. So it's a similar issue. Anyway, you can also speak in code all the time, where you refer to like case number 7 or something, which might make it less harmful, because remember one thing about emails and files and folders is you can get the subject line or the name of the file even if you have encrypting the rest of it. So things that go in the subject line are much more exposed than things that are in the content of the email. Anyway, and remember that all your gadgets are probably automatically sending emails. If we put a FortiGate firewall in the lab, and one of the things about that is it will send you emails all the time, full of information about what traffic is going through the firewall. And a lot of devices do that, and that stuff might be sensitive. So you might be aware of that. You can get free MIME certificates from Komodo, and you can buy them from other companies here. So, how useful project would be to set these up. Some students in my 140 may be interested in doing that. I'm not sure I'll add it to this class. I might. We'll see. But anyway, there's certainly you can practice setting up encrypted email. Almost nobody uses encrypted email. Just ask Hillary Clinton. And it's not really, in that case, it's not even her fault. Even the government email is not encrypted. There's just not enough infrastructure. Many times when you email somebody, their server is not configured for encryption, so you can't do anything to them. So even if you have a very nice encryption service at your company, things that go off premises have to meet the standard of the recipient, and that's a huge problem. Anyways, someday all email will be encrypted, but even after the Snowden revelations, there's still not much real progress in that front. I think it'll be another 10 years before an average person's email is really encrypted. So if you want to contact external people, then you're often required to by compliance laws and legislation and privacy laws, and there are now breach disclosure laws, at least at the state level, although I think the federal one, I think it passed recently, and so then you're going to go through the appropriate channels. You have an IR team, and you have a legal team, let them do it. If you just have other people leaking out information, it's probably going to make things worse instead of better. Yeah?
Well, you said email is not encrypted?
Typically they are not. You have to configure the server to handle keys, and most servers are not configured to handle keys. So the only way to encrypt email is to have all the servers involved encrypting it.
Like company servers, or like if you're using
And all the servers it passes through from here to there.
using a service.
Yeah, so if two people are both on like Gmail, then it's probably encrypted. But if Gmail goes to Yahoo, it's not encrypted, and both Google and Yahoo use compatible services. And there's more of that happening, but it's not universal at all. Yeah,
So you mean even I encrypt my own email on my computer?
yes,
Once I send it out, the server is not encrypted.
That's
It
right.
means nothing.
that's right. And so there are services, like I think Yahoo is finally updated, but there are services that just use old email software that has no encryption capacity at all. So you cannot reach anybody at that domain without sending unencrypted email. And there are often a lot of people that don't use the same versions of things and can't
So are they
communicate.
still able to read the email?
Yes, and your email software will typically warn you. Like if you put on PGP and then you email to somebody and you don't have their public key, it'll warn you, I can't encrypt this. Do you want to send it anyway? This is what happened to Snowden. Snowden wanted to tell Glenn Greenwald, the journalist, all these NSA secret documents, and he trusted PGP, which, by the way, is the reason you should trust it. He said even the NSA can't get in PGP. But you can't use it unless the recipient installs the public and private key, and that is complicated and buggy, and the journalist couldn't figure out how to do it. So he couldn't send him the secrets, and this was a big issue. He finally had to make a YouTube video teaching him how to install it. So he tried to understand. He had to get a technical person who came and set up the computer for him, and now that person had access to all these top secret secrets. And that is part of why the US government got such an attitude, because now you have this idiot that doesn't even know anything handling this top secret stuff and probably not backing it up right and probably not really putting it in a secure military base, but instead like in his laptop and all that was happening, and that made them very upset. Was something out there or a question?
It's just with PGP. So
Yeah.
right. So if you encrypt your email on your side with your private key, then anybody can encrypt it with your
Right.
public key.
You need them to make a private public key pair, and then you need their public key to send them things. So you can't send an email to somebody.
But that does prove it came from you, at least.
Yes, you can sign something, and then you know who sent it. But to send a secret to somebody, they have to prepare a key pair. And I don't know why it isn't just part of the install process for some normal software like Outlook Express or whatever, but it isn't for some reason. It's always an add-on process that is cumbersome. One huge problem is if you generate a key pair, you don't have that key pair on other machines. So now you have to read all your email on this one machine. You can't read it on your phone. Or you have to keep making copies of the key and moving it all around, and pretty soon somebody's got your key. Key management is the real weak spot in all these encryption schemes. Yeah.
So would that be why BlackBerry was so successful with their BES enterprise? Because all
Well, I
the
don't-
email that was going through BlackBerry
Yeah.
went through their servers, so
Yes.
they're always encrypted from.
I don't know if that's why they were successful, but that is certainly one
Well, no,
feature.
what I mean by
So that's certainly
successful,
one
I
good
mean-
thing. BlackBerry, because BlackBerry, everything went through their server. There was another one, was Hushmail. Everybody makes a Hushmail account, now it's all encrypted. If you all use the same server, then they just have to do is upgrade that server and everything's fine. It's when you cross services which is what everybody has to do if you're going to email people all over. That's why the people got mad at Clinton for not using encrypted email. But even now, she was emailing people all over the world, like ambassadors and stuff, and in their country, their server doesn't use encryption, so you can't encrypt email to them. You have to either not talk to them or accept it being plain text. What's that?
I thought she was more in trouble for the Freedom of Information Act rather than.
That also. There are several issues, yeah. Anyway, there was another question out there?
I was saying, how do you get to other people's keys?
They have to generate them. They have to make a public-private key pair. They have to install the private key where they're not going to lose it, and they have to publish the public key on some kind of public server. They could email it to you or put it on their website.
That's for everyone, actually.
Yeah, or put it on a public server. But that's a process. And I know, for example, I can't do it either. I'm too incompetent. I keep buying new machines. I've made like 5 public-private key pairs, forgotten the passwords, and lost those machines. So if people are emailing me stuff, I can't open it.
Sometimes people
Yeah.
sometimes people put it in their signature.
Yeah. But I got to have the private key someplace, and I failed to back it up and remember the password and everything, so I've cluttered up the servers with these old private keys that I can't even delete because I forgot a delete key. This is quite common, actually. Yeah,
With private and public keys per machine, or you can,
per person.
one thing, like, can you just write all your private keys like in a notebook and like stash it somewhere? And,
You could carry it around on a thumb drive or something, and then every machine you'd have to install that software and put it on there. And yeah, then you can do it. And then there's a passphrase that goes with it, which you can't forget, and that prevents other people from using it. But if you don't use it a lot, like me, then you quickly find, oh yeah, that was 2 machines ago, and anyway. But that's the game. So your incident response team will have deliverables. This is how you convince the company you're doing work. You'll have these reports going over. This is a huge issue in the real world of security. You have to, whatever you do, you have to write a good-looking report that managers can look at, that is written in proper English, spelled right, and that is not too technical. The front page of your report must explain what you did in English that anybody can understand. Then you have an appendix full of all the technical gobbledygook that nobody will look at except the technical people. But management wants a report they can understand. What did you do? What did you find? And so you update people on the status of your case. We found these 4 kinds of malware and these 10 infected servers, and we're tracing more clues, and on you go. Each one of these things, you can update people on your progress, and considering the cost of an incident response team, you really ought to be coughing up regular reports to help them justify the vast amount of money they're paying you. So you want to train your team? I thought it was kind of entertaining. Very few colleges have any program at all to train you here. Somehow City College didn't make the list. But these are the femurs. Carnegie Mellon, by the way, is the one I see from Capture the Flag teams. Carnegie Mellon absolutely rules this business. They have a team called the Plaid Parliament of Poning, and they are always ahead, and they are not just ahead of every other Capture the Flag team on earth. They are ahead by like a factor of 2. When I was in my teenage years, there was a horse called Secretariat. And I didn't even care about horse racing, but you'd watch that because it was amazing. They blow the horn, they open the gates, these horses run, and this one horse just go boo, way around, all done, these guys aren't even halfway. It's like, wow, man, that's what Carnegie Mellon is. If Carnegie Mellon wants to hack you, you're dead. Anyway, and then Purdue and Johns Hopkins are also respected, and SANS is what most people do. SANS has courses just like this, but they cost $5,000, which might be why people come to this one. But the point is, that's what I model most of my classes over. I look at what SANS is doing and try to make an imitation course, because that's what real industry professionals need, and a lot of us can't afford their outrageous prices. But the content of SANS courses is very good. Anyway, these are places you can learn this stuff, and then there's hardware. You're going to be handling data and storing it. It should be encrypted so that unauthorized people can't see it. You've got log files and malware and usernames and passwords and evidence about people that you may not prosecute, and all the stuff that just shouldn't be visible to the whole world. So you should be encrypting things. Your disk should be encrypted with something that encrypts the whole hard drive, and your external removable media, like USB thumb drives and USB hard drives, should also be encrypted. A TrueCrypt used to do that, but TrueCrypt has been abandoned for a couple of years. As soon as Microsoft ended support for XP, the TrueCrypt team mysteriously vanished. And by the way, nobody ever found out who they were even, which is the open source community is extremely disturbing. One of the many disturbing things about it, like Bitcoin, is the people that invented it are anonymous and nobody knows who they are. This is not the mark of something you can trust. That's why if your company, it would make a lot more sense to pay for something and then have the person you bought it from have like a name and an address so you can sue them if it doesn't work and things like that. Yeah.
But they're also a point of failure, because if they or their families are targeted, they can put a backdoor in for who's ever willing to pressure them.
Yes. So some people, yeah, but I think, anyway, most people I think are stodgy like me and they'd rather know who you're dealing with. But anyway, it's an issue. Anyway, TrueCrypt suddenly quit, and now they made a clone of it called VeraCrypt, so that's an option. But most operating systems now have proprietary encryption, like Microsoft's BitLocker and FileVault on the Mac. But you certainly want to encrypt the hard drives for your mobile devices, because that protects you in case the whole device is stolen. Somebody steals the whole laptop. If it's got a whole disk encryption, then they hopefully can't get in because of that. It is not impossible to defeat these things, but it is very difficult. In practice, if you want to get through one of these encryption schemes, the most efficient way to do it is to pay money to Elcomsoft, a Russian company that primarily focuses on breaking through passwords, and they make wonderful, expensive tools that will make a pretty fast work of almost all of these, but I don't think they can always get into BitLocker. But they can get into it sometimes. But they really work very hard to find every little flaw and exploit it and make efficient software. Anyway, in the field, if you're going to do forensics, like taking disk images and analyzing them, then you just need as much hardware as you can afford. Forensic experts typically spend tens of thousands of dollars on their equipment and more expensive gadgets, because you have to handle vast amounts of data and it's really slow. So they pay for fast disk duplicators and big machines. You just make them as big and nice as possible. And forensics is so expensive that once you get in the business, you have a pile of money coming in, and so they typically invest a ton of it in equipment. And they have big safes and giant duplicators and racks full of machines and stuff. And at your office, you have a dedicated lab with write blockers for every kind of drive. A write blocker used to be a wire cutter. You just cut one wire in the flat cable. That was the write wire, and now it can't write to the disk. But nowadays, that doesn't work at all. It's far more complicated than that. Your write blocker costs $300 and has a gigabyte of memory, and it has to lie to the computer and make the computer think you did connect to a drive, you did update the journal, you did put a new date on the trash can, and protect the drive from actually being changed by any of that. So anyway, yeah. The purpose of a write blocker is so you can connect a hard drive to your machine and copy all the data off it without changing it at all. And that's considered the first step of any hard drive forensic examination. You make a copy of the evidence without altering it, then you take the original drive and put it in the safe, and then you work with the copy. That's the standard procedure. Good. All right. Anyway, that's the game. You always work with copies. One issue that used to be a big thing was how do you keep malware off your forensic workstation? And there are a lot of rules from the old days where you never connect that machine to the internet at all. You to make it clean, you run an antivirus on it and scan your drive so people can't say you had malware on it. The Mandia solution sounds pretty good. They have a clean virtual machine with all the tools installed, and they spin up a new instance of the virtual machine for every case. So you started with a virtual machine that did not have files from another case. There was a case that Steve Haley, one of my teachers, had where he primarily works for the Washington State Teachers Union, and so it's always the same. In his case, some teacher is accused of looking at porn in the classroom. And so the investigator he got to court, and the other forensic investigator on the other side came in and said, "Look at all this porn I found on his machine." And Steve had analyzed the same image, and there was no porn on it. And he said, "Dude, let me guess, you're using FTK, right? Then when you wanted to see the registry keys, you clicked File, Acquire Registry, right? Yeah. What you got was the registry off your own forensic examination machine, which you were apparently using to view porn, which is a completely terrible activity. It shouldn't have been connected to the internet. And this is how you win a case. After you humiliate an examiner like that, you win. You moron." Anyway, but that's stuff that happens. But they avoid all that. If you just have a clean virtual machine that doesn't contain anything except what it should have, then you won't have to have that unpleasant argument about how did this weird stuff end up on your forensic examination machine. So red blocking kits are here. Yeah.
I have a question. A good friend of mine does this forensics for the government.
Mm-hmm.
They're constantly sending him new machines all the freaking time, and
Yeah.
like some supercomputer will show up at his house and it's
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, because
So that's pretty much why they do it all the time. That's why they send them so many new machines, because
Well, I'm not sure.
He always has fresh ones.
Well, there's two issues, and I'm not sure exactly which one is here. One is you can save a lot of time with a better, faster, bigger machine, and time is money. The second thing is, especially in the world of portable device forensics, you have to keep buying new stuff because people keep making new phones, and they have new plugs and connectors and power cords, and you have to have connectors for every kind of phone. So you keep on having to buy new stuff, and also hard drive standards change. You have to have the right equipment to connect everything. And that can be pretty difficult for old stuff and also new stuff. At both ends, you have a problem. People have really old computers, and you don't have the obsolete equipment to connect to them, and people have new stuff, and you don't have the right equipment to connect to it. So both of those mean you have to keep buying more and more and more stuff. or making contacts with other people so you can outsource some of the work to people that happen to have that. One common situation is you connect to local users groups to get the old stuff handled. Like if somebody brought me an Amiga, I'd be, man, but there's an Amiga users group somewhere that has Amigas and could get you an image of that data. Yeah.
I have it.
Yeah, you have it. Good. Well, you're the man. I'll keep that in mind.
Now, as a contractor, it's on you to buy all that stuff.
Well, you know,
Unless you work for a company.
well, you provide some degree of service. And you typically, if you're a company, then you avoid this by having some standard company equipment, and you have enough hardware and software to image the company laptops. But if you're the cops, you have to image everything they find at a crime scene. So they have to have much more. So, but everybody can only do so much. And then you either tell the customer to go away, or much better, you have contacts where you can say, well, I'm going to have to move this to my specialist. And one I would highly recommend is Drive Savers in Novato. They are really advanced, they are really expensive, and they can do anything. They can take apart the drive, move out the platters, they can take apart the SSD and suck the data off the bits. You know, if you don't have the equipment, they can probably do it for a price. And that would be just like a doctor, right? You go to the doctor, you're sick, they don't say, well, I'm not a heart doctor, so you'll have to die. They say, well, let me refer you to a heart doctor. Yeah.
I helped on a case where the suspect had the data stored on his mom's Singer sewing machine.
Oh, I didn't know. So sewing machines have computers too. I guess they would. Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah. And sticking the data in a weird place is a common thing people worry about. Especially pedophiles with kiddie porn. They've got it like in the rafters and in the floorboards and everywhere. Because they know it's like drugs. They know they don't want anyone finding it and they're hiding it. Anyway, so then there's equipment shared by your forensic devices. You can have some large servers or large hard drives where you store all the archived data. One issue with forensic data, just like paper data, is you have a ton of data you have to store for some long period of time. By the way, if you run an independent shop, you have to decide on a storage fee and build it into your contracts, because you may well have to store that data for something like 7 years, or statute of limitations to run out or something, and you end up with a safe full of drives. You have to buy another safe. Anyway, but you need just a lot of equipment and also all the usual computer maintenance equipment, because you have to open all these laptops and iPhones and everything and get the storage units out. That's the hardest part for me of fixing machines, is getting the case open. I often break them getting the case open, which is unprofessional. These days I go to students and get them to open the hard cases because they're much better at it than I am. Anyway, yeah.
Update that with a Blu-ray.
Yeah, Blu-ray also, yeah. Anyway, so for ad hoc monitoring, if you just want to set up monitoring for a small period of time, you could just take a laptop and connect it as long as it's a fast laptop. But most of the time, Mandia uses a 1U rack-mounted system, because then you can have a really high-end CPU and you have enough speed in data transfer rate and processing to capture network equipment. If you just turn on something like Wireshark or TCP dump, one thing to be aware of is it does not capture all the packets. You'll often see you don't have them all. If the packets come through too fast, it can't keep up and it just silently drops some of the packets. So if you really want to get all the data, you have to make a pretty high-end machine and design it correctly to capture packets. And there are network monitoring projects that make open source tools here. Security Onion is a live CD you can use to make an IDS, a network security toolkit. Easy IDS are other ones to use, and these make fine projects. I may have some of my 140 students doing it. They're going to be setting up IDS systems, and here's more directions to go. So there are things that will easily monitor your network. One very common thing you run into in this business is people say you have to use usually Encase. It's the only thing that is forensically sound. Everything else, the courts won't accept it. This is a common advertising lie. The fact is there is no court stamp of approval that makes a tool right, and there's no tools that are wrong. It is just examiners. And the way it works is examiners go through a process of being questioned by the attorneys, and if you have good answers, your tools will be accepted. And none of the tools are perfect. They all have bugs, they all make mistakes, so you really should confirm any finding with a second tool. And so Encase has got this reputation that they're accepted in court. There have been thousands of cases tried with it, therefore you can trust it, and they make it easy for you. But the fact is you can do whatever you like. Steve Haley, for example, uses a lot of tools. He says, when people ask me what tool I use, I refuse to go there, which is also what Mandia does. They say, I use a variety of tools appropriate to the need, and everything is verified with 2 separate tools, and any competent forensic examiner will find the same thing. And if you can say that and you're convincing, that's the end of the argument. Anyway, I must say, if you don't know what your tool is doing, none of them are any good, because you're just using them incompetently, and that's often the case with these forensic tools. Jacob Applebaum, who was the head of WikiLeaks, or second in command at WikiLeaks for a long time. The FBI started seizing all his computers and thumb drives and everything every time he left the country because, for fairly good reason, they suspected he was taking confidential U.S. documents out of the country, and they didn't want him doing that. So one time he got so mad at them, he took nothing but a thumb drive with the Bill of Rights on it. And then when they grabbed him, they couldn't get the data off. And he's like, damn it. And they were using Encase. They didn't know how to use Encase, and they couldn't find the Bill of Rights on there. He's like, man, I went to all this bother to punk you, and it didn't work. Anyway, there's tests. This is the Daubert standard for the admissibility of scientific evidence. If you follow this stuff, the computer forensics is actually a very disturbing field. Like, lie detectors don't count in court, astrology doesn't count in court, but hair fiber samples counted in court until 6 months ago when they finally retroactively said, there's no science behind matching hair samples. It's not like fingerprints. And the fact is, there's an enormous number of cases. One of my previous forensics books had these. There are a lot of fake forensic examiners. They're responsible for like hundreds of people going to prison, and then it turns out they were just lying. They would just take an empty vial, put in some blood from somewhere else, claim that blood matched the scene, and stuff like that. Just do this for like decades before somebody finally figures it out. It's actually very far from a science and very scary. Anyway, so there are these standards, which is, are you using accepted scientific procedures? And then there's more tests that came up after the Daubert standard. So these are things that are used by judges at their discretion to determine whether a test is scientific enough. Like, is there enough data? Is the expert seem competent enough? Is there some body of literature of reputable scientists backing this thing up? And as you know, in this world where we have large amounts of scientists that take a lot of money to claim, the top ramen people pay scientists to tell you that salt is good for you. The cigarette companies pay people to tell you that smoking is good for you. And the oil companies pay people to tell you that the earth is not warming up. And they make a lot of mileage at these things, to where surveys in states say a lot of people really believe that the earth is not warming up and things like that. It's a problem. The legal community has a huge problem telling fake science from real science. And it doesn't help that a lot of what ought to be real science is in fact fraudulent in various ways. So anyway, it's not as perfect and clean as I imagined it would be. I thought it'd be like mathematics. Do forensics, you find the proof, they really did it. It's not that simple. Anyway, so there's a lot of software used out there. And let me just take a look and see how far it is to the next iClickers. It's too far. Let's just stop here. We'll take a break. We'll pick up at 7:10. Let me stop my recording, give you a 10-minute break. It's this one, quit. This is 121, chapter 3A. All right.